presidency, President Obama has talked a lot about the need to address the grave fiscal outlook of the federal government. And so in that vein, the president created something called the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform. And he did that to, quote, address our nation's fiscal challenges. And he charged that commission with identifying policies to improve the fiscal situation. And fittingly, that report has been called the moment of truth. But what did our president do during that moment of truth? Well, he failed to lead. Rather than rise to the occasion and make good on the faith the American people placed in him, the president submitted the most expensive budget in the history of America. The president's failure to lead is absolutely astounding. So I agree with Chairman Ryan when he says that basically the president has punted on his responsibility. But the disappointment is further than just the Republicans here today. The co-chairman of his own debt commission summed up the president's plan as going, quote, nowhere near where they will have to go to resolve our fiscal nightmare. So in my opinion, rather than going nowhere near a solution, the administration has submitted a budget that basically forces us closer to the crisis point. So accordingly to the nonpartisan CBO, the president has proposed a $3.7 trillion in spending this year. This is over a quarter of the GDP, a level that we have not seen in the United States since World War II. And the president would have us sustain that level for over a decade. So it would be bad enough that were all. It gets actually much worse. This year, the budget deficit is estimated to be around $1.6 trillion. Over 10 years, the president's deficits will total $9.5 trillion, setting the national debt on a course to skyrocket to unprecedented levels. Again, according to the CBO, the debt level held by the public would rise from 69% of GDP in 2011 to 87% of GDP in 2021. So with interest payments on our current and already staggering level of debt, are consuming a larger and larger percentage of tax revenues that flow into the government coffers. So the CBO recently estimated that the American people will, get this, pay $260 billion in interest alone on the national debt. We could be paying almost $1 trillion in interest by 2021. So when you have a hole, what do they always say? Stop digging. So it's crystal clear that this country has a spending problem, as the chairman said. Despite evidence to the contrary, this budget that the president proposes is not the direction to go in, as opposed to the one submitted by Mr. Ryan. Rather than cutting spending, the president proposes to take even more of the hard-earned money of the American people. Over 10 years, the president's plan would increase taxes on families and small businesses by $1.6 trillion. All of this is even more daunting arithmetic when you think about it. These numbers have a real effect on the lives of individuals, on families, on businesses. So should the president's proposals be enacted, it would doom American families to doing what? A crushing tax burden, smother the ability of small businesses to create new jobs, result in ever-increasing interest rates, and set the nation on course for an economic day of reckoning. In short, the president's refusal to lead in this situation threatens the American standard of living, the American dream, and American status as a superpower. Now, I have so far focused on what the president's plan will do, but what is equally disturbing in this is what the president's budget does not do. The president's plans contains no significant reforms of Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. Annual spending on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid is projected to rise from $1.4 trillion all the way up to $2.7 trillion over the next decade, and CBO again projects that maintaining all promised benefits would eventually require what? Putting the middle class in a 63% income tax bracket. Get that. And small businesses and upper class families in an 88% bracket to pay for all that. Again, rather than cut spending back by the government, the president would send an overwhelming tax bill to the American people. Mr. Chairman, everywhere you look, we are on the road in this country to bankruptcy. And the president's budget makes promises that they cannot possibly keep. To be specific, our government has made $88.6 trillion in promises it cannot be kept through our entitlement programs. Cutting spending and government programs, they're not easy. But the American people did not elect us to take the easy way out. However, in this moment of truth, the president did exactly that. So I look forward to working with the members of this committee to provide an honest solution for the American people by cutting spending, balancing the budget, and putting the United States on the road to sustainability and also prosperity. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now yield 5